You're listening to Marketing Mavens on Good Morning Delhi with Sarthak.
And what a lovely thing you're doing, because what we are doing here, of course, is trying to see if we can strip down the idea to show you the innards, so to speak, and that might be a little unpalatable as a description, but I thought I'd shock you into listening, because shock and awe, I tell you, sometimes can work quite well. And today, of course, an awe-inspiring story about something that actually shocked our parents a little because we were reading it, but became a totem for at least 2 generations. And we've got, of course, with us Krishnan. He's, of course, a brand and culture expert, and more importantly, head of content with the Publicis Groupe. So that's a label that is flauntable, isn't it, Hari?
Exactly.
And what we're talking about, of course, is Archies. I mean, it's back in the news. The movie's coming out on OTT. People are talking about, the whole comic book culture, etc., etc. But it wasn't actually the 80s and the 90s when Archies was sort of, defining cool for a whole generation, that it started a lot earlier, you were telling us, yeah?
Yeah, Sarthak, I think the interesting part is that Archie started around the same time when superhero characters came on the scene, and that was in the 1940s.
Right.
And I find it quite interesting to see that a confused teenager who's torn between the love of 2 girls and also doing seemingly useless things, sitting inside a cafe, etc.
Right.
Also made his entry along with 2 superheroes, Superman and Captain America.
That's right.
In post-Depression and during the Second World War.
Right.
And for a good reason, these characters were invented. And so it's rather strange that along with 2 mighty superheroes who were supposed to protect you and give you a guardianship,
right,
there's also a awkward, gawky teenager, redhead, who made an entry into popular culture.
For sure. And you tell me that research has shown why, because there was actually a rather sinister reason why, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's, I guess the way it all evolved was that towards 1945, when the war was getting over.
That's the Second World War, of course.
Second World War.
Yeah.
There were a lot of returning forces. And of course, they had been away for several years. And when they were returning, the economy found, and that too we are talking about a post-depression economy, it found an influx of so many employable people that they had to pull back into the workforce. Now, at that point of time, there were a lot of young men and women who were already going into jobs, into blue-collar jobs. There was really no restriction in those days. You could become a construction worker or a factory worker when you were 15.
Right.
You could drive a car when you were 15. So the economy found itself in a conflict of 2 huge cohorts. One is these young people, whom we call the teenagers, and we'll come back to that, and the returning forces who needed jobs. And that's the conflict in which this character was finding itself blooming.
Sure.
Really.
Sure. So basically, what was happening was that a whole generation was being told it's okay to be useless, it's okay to run after girls, it's okay to obsess about food and not work, because it was a subliminal message saying that it's okay because the returning forces needed that job. So probably it was the subliminal messaging of it all.
I guess that's how marketing works, really, because you needed to tell people, you need to reassure people that if they are doing things that are not productive within quotes, it's fine. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to waste your time. So I think that was, a brilliant example of how society engineered from different quarters.
Also sort of the perfidy of marketing, isn't it? I mean, the insidious nature where subliminal messaging about being cool
that just enters you and it just kind of seeps through and you don't really know it.
On the one hand, comic books were showing us that there are these superheroes who will protect us and making us feel a little better, and then there was Archies, which was telling us it's okay, it's cool to not do things. And this is also the time when forces were returning and they needed those jobs, so a whole teenage population needed to be told that it's okay to step back and not do something, which was the marketing aspect, so to speak. But there's another thing that you were underlining in the conversation that we were having off air, which is the fact that the etymology of teenagers, actually, where it came from, the provenance is actually around this time also, and you had a story about that as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting discovery that one makes when you explore the word teenagers, when you look at the etymology of this word. And thanks to the internet, all the information and statistics is available to us. And if you really look at this word, it started gaining popularity in usage only after the 1940s, which means before that there was they were just called young men and women,
right?
And they were just called adolescents, and really teenage somewhere brought in a certain glamorous angle and a certain aspirational tag to that entire adolescence.
Sure.
And it kind of called out the ability to have more fun than to say that you're confused or you're really not a fully grown adult.
Absolutely.
So that's the interesting discovery. And I guess in the middle of that sat this whole evolution of characters such as Archie's and Jughead and Betty and Veronica and Reggie Mantle.
Yeah.
And I guess all of this came together perfectly to create that concoction of stories that would reside in people's heads.
Also, it became a bit of a, it became a template for society in America, did it not? The working class Betty and the very, very rich Veronica and Reggie and Archie stuck in the middle, not knowing where to go, where to look, this way or the other, and then the tyrannical fathers, everything was there.
And yeah, Mr. Lodge and the friendly, goofy principal Weatherby.
Absolutely.
And to use a pun, these are all archetypes or archetypes, as a lot of people say. So
they were. Now, the Indian connection to Archie's. I mean, Archie's made its way to India, and the question is, did it influence pop culture in India, Hari?
I think we can see a lot of examples ourselves.
And of course, we are at pains to underline that this is hypothesis.
Yeah.
This is what we think. So please don't take it as gospel truth, because research on your own is also very, very important. But this is, there are reasons to believe, right, Hari?
Yeah. So I think perhaps Archie's made its, Archie Comics made its entry through a lot of expats who were living here. And there were people. There were a lot of forces in India which were stationed after the war. In fact, in the cities of Delhi and Bombay, they used to get a lot of these comics in their courier, and they made its way into bookshop, much like pop music, much like jazz.
Of course.
This was part of. It got infused into our urban culture.
Right.
And it's remarkable to see how the iconography of Archie Comics got replicated in the movies that came later. So what I'd really like to point out here is that if you see movies made in the 70s, there is a very specific movie that I'd like to call out called Umang.
Okay.
Which is about a group of young teenagers who have a dance club in the middle of a residential complex, and that movie actually underlined the conflict between the old generation and the new generation, which was sometime in the 70s.
Right.
And through the 70s, there were movies like Kal Aaj Aur Kal, which had all the generations of Kapoors.
Of course.
Where you could see a lot of scenes and a lot of settings that were very similar to that of the Archie's settings.
The bell bottoms, the flower shirts,
and the purple outfits, and Josie and the Pussycats kind of bands, etc.
Absolutely.
And more recently, I think the biggest influence that we see of Archie Comics is by Karan Johar, who himself was, I guess, an 80s kid.
Yeah.
And he, I'm sure, grew up on a staple diet of Archie Comics besides other things. And all his movies like Kuch Kuch Hota Hai or Dil To Pagal Hai, if you look at...
the sensibilities, the visual sensibilities.
And even the plot.
Yeah.
If you look at it, by and large, there will be one guy and two girls that he's torn between. Usually the archetypes of Betty and Veronica. If you look at Main Hoon Na, you had a principal who resembled Weatherby. So across several movies that you see that I mentioned, you can see the archetypes that were represented in Archie Comics.
But of course, adapted to suit our culture, yes?
Exactly, with a lot of Hindi songs. And of course, a marriage at the end. And that too is interesting because about 10 or 15 years back, they tried to revitalize Archie by getting him married off to Veronica and then Betty, which is a separate story altogether.
Absolutely.
But then, yes, these themes keep getting refreshed in India, in Bollywood.
Since we're living in the world of social media, Hari, we must do a listicle only, no? So the whole aspect of, the whole aspect of the marketing aspect of Archie's and what it teaches us in 3 to 5 points.
So I guess the first point is that there is a large cultural phenomena that is born out of the state of the economy and the sentiment of the people, which is the psychographics of the people, what they are going through at that point of time.
Right.
And if you can identify that and that's exactly what happened in the 40s, and then towards the 70s and 80s when this whole young versus old and the new generation started happening in India. And if you look at that, marketing kind of plays on that kind of a scenario.
Sure.
And builds something.
Of course.
The second thing is, can you build a lifestyle? Marketing helps build a lifestyle that is aspirational.
Right.
That's what we've seen. Marketing created this whole thing called teenagers.
Yeah.
And made it okay to waste time, to be confused, to have soda pop all the time.
Yeah.
And then a lot of brands then kind of ride on that
course.
acceptance and legitimacy of those habits. The third thing is marketing pushes characters and archetypes, because society is made of different people, and you don't exactly identify yourself as a person, so you have many other characters to choose from and mirror yourself against.
Sort of like a countermeasure to the othering, where you feel that you're othered, but there is a template that makes you identify and thus become a bit of a group and a part of a group.
Still part of a tribe.
Yeah.
So marketing kind of sets those boundaries and helps you play within those boundaries.
Absolutely.
And of course, last but not the least, it gives you a lot of stories to identify with, to engage with, and to make it current. And that's what people keep talking about. And I guess Archie's is a brilliant example of how a creation which has not necessarily been engineered like that, but has become and evolved over time, become a totem of teenage culture.
Absolutely. And that's why it's important to know the story, because sometimes the morals need to be examined a little more, because thought is important. That's why we thought we'd try and see if we can trigger thought a little and see if you can look at the other side as well, because there's always another side. Far too often in these times, this is becoming a bit of a favorite phrase of mine, Hari. We are confusing information with knowledge. Information is always the thread that weaves the fabric of knowledge. So maybe a good idea to just pursue the knowledge with the threads of information that we have, and that's what we're trying to do here on Marketing Mavens, along with the wonderful Hari Krishnan. Thank you so much, Hari. This has been
Thank you,
absolutely
Sarthak.
wonderful.
This is excellent.
So yeah, if you've got questions, please feel free. Sarthak from Radio is my Instagram ID. Hari, can people reach you on the Instagram somewhere?
Oh yeah, I have a handle called flashback_Gordon, and I'm on Insta, so please reach out to me there. I'm also now on Threads.
Oh, so. Of course. So yeah, if you'd like to, there it is. Taking a break, coming right back right here on 94.3 Radio 1.